My name is Captain Elena Ward. I'm 28 years old, and tonight I can barely recognize the woman reflected in the hotel mirror. Straightening the collar of my navy dress uniform, I feel my pulse hammer in my throat. 3 years back, my family staged a funeral in my name. They told the world I was gone, killed in a combat accident overseas. But I survived, and now I'm about to march uninvited into my sister Rebecca's wedding. My fingers tremble as they brush the faded scar running across my jawline. Today they won't see a corpse in a casket, they'll see a soldier they buried alive. The real question isn't whether I'll go inside. It's whether I'm prepared for my father, Colonel Ward, to lock eyes with me again. Before I take you into that church, make sure you let me know where you're watching from and subscribe, because you won't believe what happens next. 3 years ago I was a different woman in a different world. At 25 I was still living on base near Fort Bragg, coming home on weekends to visit my family in rural North Carolina. My father, Robert Ward, 52, had retired as a decorated Army colonel. My mother, Diane, 49, had spent her life as the backbone of the family, raising us under strict discipline and military precision. Rebecca, my younger sister, was 22 at the time. She just finished her degree in education and was the perfect cadet in their eyes. She always obeyed orders, never questioned rank, and lived to make them proud. I was the one who resisted the chain of command at home. I asked too many questions, wanted to choose my own battles, and craved a future beyond the family's rigid expectations. Everything shifted the moment I met Adrian Park. He was a trauma resident at the military hospital in Fayetteville. Overworked, brilliant, and somehow still managed to send me messages that made me laugh even after the toughest drills. Adrian was steady, compassionate, and had a quiet strength I respected. But he wasn't what my family expected. He was Korean American, and that was where the firestorm began. The night I first brought Adrian to dinner was like stepping into a war zone without cover. My father interrogated him with clipped questions about his background, barely masking his disapproval. My mother smiled with the kind of politeness sharper than a blade. When Adrian left, the kitchen turned into a battlefield. My father squared off with me, voice low but seething. "That man isn't right for you, Elena. This family has traditions. We don't mix outside them." My blood boiled. Traditions? You mean hard work, honor, discipline? Because Adrian has all of that. His jaw clenched. "Don't get smart with me, soldier. You know exactly what I mean. This family's reputation matters in this community." After that, every conversation turned into an interrogation. Where had we gone? What did we talk about? When would I come to my senses and find a respectable Army officer from the right background? Rebecca tried to whisper encouragement at first. "Don't let them break you, Elena. Adrian seems good for you." But months of pressure wore her down. She started keeping her distance whenever Adrian was around, and eventually she stopped defending me altogether. The breaking point came one icy February night. Adrian had proposed the evening before, slipping a simple ring onto my finger. My heart was still glowing when I gathered the family in the living room. Rebecca was grading lesson plans, Mom was mending a uniform, and Dad was buried in the newspaper. I raised my hand so they could see the ring. "Adrian and I are engaged. We're getting married next month at the courthouse." Dad's paper hit the floor. Mom froze, needle suspended. Rebecca's eyes widened. "Absolutely not," Dad barked, surging to his feet so fast the chair nearly toppled. "That marriage will not happen." "I'm not asking permission," I shot back. "I'm 25. I've earned the right to choose." His face reddened, voice rising. "As long as you carry my name, you follow my command. And my order is, you will not marry that man." Mom's voice wavered as she tried to soften the blow. "Elena, think carefully. Think of your children, of what people will say." I met her eyes, steady as a soldier under fire. "I am thinking of my future. With someone who respects me." Rebecca tried to defuse it. "Maybe we should all just breathe," but Dad cut her off. "No. She makes her choice here and now. Him or us. She can't have both." Silence hung heavier than the ticking clock on the mantel. My father, unyielding. My mother, tearful but nodding her loyalty to him. My sister, too shaken to stand by me. I whispered, "Then I choose him." Dad's verdict was immediate. "Then you're no daughter of mine. Pack your things and get out." Upstairs, I shoved my life into one bag and walked out the door. Rebecca followed me to the car, crying, "Please don't go. Maybe Dad will change his mind." I hugged her tight. No, he won't. But I'll always love you. Remember that. That was the last time I spoke to any of them for 3 years. Adrian and I started fresh in a modest apartment in Fayetteville, and for 6 months, life felt like peace after a war. David worked long shifts at the hospital and I freelanced as a graphic designer, slowly building up my client base. We'd wake up every morning and cook breakfast together. David teaching me how to make perfect scrambled eggs and showing me how to fold dumplings the way his grandmother had taught him. We planned a simple wedding ceremony, just the two of us and a judge. David's parents had flown in from California to meet me, and they welcomed me with open arms. His mother, Mrs. Chin, spent an entire afternoon teaching me family recipes and showing me photos of David as a chubby little boy. It was everything I'd hoped my own family would be. I missed my family terribly, especially Sarah. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to call her and share something funny that happened or to ask her opinion about wedding dress styles. David tried calling my parents a few times, hoping to bridge the gap. But Dad would hang up as soon as he heard David's voice. "Give them time," David would say, rubbing my shoulders when I'd cry about it. Sometimes love has to be patient, but time wasn't something I had. It was a Friday afternoon in late October. I just finished a client meeting downtown and was driving home through the rain. Oregon rain in October is relentless, turning the roads into slick, dangerous ribbons of asphalt. I remember singing along to the radio, excited to tell David about landing a big contract with a local restaurant chain. The truck came out of nowhere. I was stopped at a red light when I saw it in my rearview mirror. An enormous semi-truck barreling toward me, clearly unable to stop on the wet pavement. I had maybe 2 seconds to brace myself before impact. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed 3 weeks later. Tubes in my arms and a bandage covering half my face. David was asleep in the chair beside my bed, his hand resting on mine. He looked like he'd aged 5 years, his face gaunt and stubbled, his clothes wrinkled. When he saw my eyes open, he started crying. "Thank God," he whispered. "Thank God you're okay." But I wasn't okay. The doctors explained that I'd suffered a severe concussion, some brain swelling, and would have permanent scarring on my left cheek where glass from the windshield had cut me. My left leg was broken in 2 places, and I'd need months of physical therapy to walk normally again. "Did you call my family?" I asked weakly. David's face fell. "I tried, Maddie. I called them the night of the accident." "What did they say?" He was quiet for a long time, holding my hand and looking at the floor. Finally, he met my eyes. "Your father said you made your choice. He said you were dead to them." The words hit me harder than the truck had. He said what? "I'm sorry, baby." I tried calling back. I tried explaining how serious it was, but they wouldn't listen. "Your father just kept saying that they had no daughter named Meline." I closed my eyes and tried to process this information. My own father had been told I was fighting for my life in a hospital, and his response was to deny my existence. The physical pain from my injuries was nothing compared to the emotional devastation of that moment. During my recovery, I tried reaching out myself. I called the house from my hospital room, but the line had been disconnected. I sent emails that bounced back. I even asked David to drive by the house to see if they still lived there. But the neighbors told him my parents had instructed everyone not to give out any information about the family to strangers asking questions. It was like I'd been erased from their lives completely. What I didn't know then was that my eraser was more complete than I could have imagined. 2 months after the accident, while I was still learning to walk again with a cane, David came home from work with a strange expression on his face. He sat down beside me on our couch and took my hands in his. "I ran into someone from your hometown today," he said carefully. "A nurse at the hospital mentioned she was from the same area when she saw your address on a form." "Oh, who was it?" "Her name was Jenny Morrison. She said she went to high school with you." I remembered Jenny. She'd been in my graduating class, not a close friend, but someone I'd known well enough to chat with in the hallways. "What did she say?" David was quiet for a moment. "Maddie, she offered her condolences." "For what?" "She said she was sorry for my loss. She said the whole town was shocked when they heard about your death in the car accident." The room started spinning. "My death." "She said your family held a memorial service for you 2 months ago at the Baptist church. She said it was a beautiful service, that your parents spoke about what a wonderful daughter you'd been before you lost your way." I felt like I was drowning. My own family hadn't just cut me out of their lives. They'd told the entire community I was dead. They'd held a funeral for me while I was lying in a hospital bed fighting to recover from injuries that nearly killed me. David showed me the newspaper clipping Jenny had given him. There was in black and white. Melanie Miller, 25, remembered at memorial service. The article described how I died tragically in a car accident survived by my loving parents and sister. It mentioned my volunteer work at the church and my artistic talents, painting me as a model daughter whose life had been cut short. There was no mention of David, no mention of our relationship, no acknowledgement of the life I'd actually been living. They'd rewritten my story, completely turning me into the daughter they wished I'd been rather than the woman I actually was. The worst part was reading about Sarah's grief. The article quoted her as saying, "Maddie was the best big sister anyone could ask for. I'll miss her laugh and her advice every day for the rest of my life." Sarah really believed I was dead. She was mourning me, missing me, grieving for the sister she thought she'd lost forever. And it was all because our parents couldn't bear to admit they'd been wrong to cut me off. I spiraled into depression after that discovery. Not just because of the betrayal but because of what it meant for Sarah. How could I contact her now? How could I tell her I was alive without destroying her faith in our parents? How could I force her to choose between the truth and the family? That was all she had left. David held me while I cried for hours that night. "They don't deserve you," he whispered into my hair. They never did. But knowing that didn't make it hurt any less. David and I made the difficult decision to leave Oregon entirely. The memories were too painful and we needed a fresh start somewhere nobody knew our story. We moved to Seattle where David found a position at Swedish Medical Center and I slowly rebuilt my freelance graphic design business. It took 2 years but gradually we created a beautiful life together. We had a small wedding ceremony in a garden overlooking Puget Sound with David's family and a few close friends we'd made in Seattle. Mrs. Chun cried during the ceremony, telling me afterward that she'd prayed every day for David to find someone who would love him as much as I clearly did. I threw myself into my work, channeling all my pain and energy into building something meaningful. My design studio, Cascade Creative, grew from a one-woman operation in our spare bedroom to a thriving business with 5 employees and clients throughout the Pacific Northwest. Success felt like the best revenge against the family who'd written me off as a failure. David was promoted to attending physician in the emergency department. We'd managed to buy a sturdy old colonial house just outside Seattle, complete with a vegetable garden I tended like a field kit. On weekends, Adrian and I explored trails around Mount Rainier, or tested out new restaurants like we were on reconnaissance missions for the best meal in town. Life was good. Yet no matter how full our days felt, there was always a hollow space carved out in my chest shaped like Rebecca. I thought of her constantly. Did she ever finish her teaching license? Had she found someone worthy of her loyalty? Did she still wear the silver dog tag I gave her for her 18th birthday, the one engraved with "Stay Brave"? Passing by schools on base sometimes triggered daydreams of her standing at a chalkboard, reading to wide-eyed kids the way she used to read bedtime stories to me after Dad deployed. Adrian and I had a pact. No contact with my family. The betrayal cut too deep, and reopening that wound felt like walking into enemy fire without armor. Still, I couldn't stop the memories from ambushing me when I least expected them. Then last February everything changed. One night, after another 14-hour day at my design firm, I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram under the alias I used, Ella Cross instead of Elena Ward, when I froze. A post from Rebecca. My hands went clammy. She was beaming in the photo, a modest ring glittering on her finger. The caption, "He proposed on the beach." I wish my sister Elena could be here to share this moment. I know she's watching over me from above. The tears came before I could stop them. Adrian found me hunched on the couch, uniform shirt still on, phone shaking in my grip. "She's getting married," I choked out. He wrapped me up like a medic shielding a casualty. "I know. This hurts." Over the next days I couldn't focus on work. I created a burner account and followed her quietly. Rebecca's feed was full of lesson plans, goofy pictures with her fiancé. His name was Mark Thompson, a fellow teacher, and cheerful snapshots with our parents. But sprinkled between the joy were posts drenched in grief. On my birthday, 28 years ago, my big sister was born. I still save her a piece of cake. On the anniversary of my so-called death, 2 years without her. Some days I still reach for my phone. At Christmas, the hardest part is the empty chair at the table. My throat burned reading those words. She'd been mourning a ghost while I was just 3 hours up the road. Then came the official wedding announcement. August 15th, 14:30 hours, St. Catherine's Chapel, reception at the officers' club in town. That night Adrian found me pacing the kitchen like a soldier waiting for orders. I have to go, I told him. His brows knit. Elena, think this through. Your parents told an entire community you were dead. Crashing the wedding doesn't just hit them, it hits Rebecca. She deserves the truth, I snapped back. She's been carrying grief that never should have existed. For weeks we went in circles. Adrian worried I'd unravel, that Rebecca would resent me for waiting this long, that the shock would tarnish her happiest day. But my resolve hardened. I'll sit in the back. I won't make a scene. She'll see me, know I'm alive, and I'll slip out. But she has to know. Finally, Adrian relented. If this is what you need, I'll back you. But I'm coming. I shook my head. Not this time. This is my mission. August 15th, I woke in a quiet hotel room in my hometown. The first time I'd set foot there in over 3 years. My stomach was a knot of nerves, but my decision was locked in. I stood at the sink, tracing the faint scar on my jawline, the remnant of shrapnel from an ambush overseas. I wrapped a scarf to hide it, then slipped into a simple navy dress. Not flashy, not threatening, just enough to blend in. Neutral heels, minimal jewelry, a touch of lipstick. I needed to look like I belonged, not like I was trying to command the room. My reflection stared back at me. A soldier stepping into enemy territory with no backup. Too late to second-guess. The drive to St. Catharines took 15 minutes past streets that hadn't changed since my childhood. Same storefronts, same families, same air thick with gossip. I parked 3 blocks away and marched slowly toward the sound of wedding bells. My heart hammered so loud I swore people could hear it echoing off the pavement. Cars lined the curb, guests in polished suits and dresses filing up the church steps. Families in polished suits and pressed dresses filed up the church steps, arms loaded with gift bags and cameras. I knew almost every face. Mrs. Hawkins from the corner store, hair silver now but posture the same. The Johnson brothers bickering just like they had when we were kids running drills in the yard. Sergeant Peterson, my old Sunday school teacher, hobbling with a cane but still rocking the same bow tie he'd worn 2 decades ago. These were the very people who'd stood at my so-called funeral. They'd mourned me, cooked casseroles for my parents, traded stories of the daughter they thought was buried. And here I was, about to march past them like a revenant soldier returned from the dead. I held back until the ceremony was underway. From outside, the swell of organ music carried through the open doors. Slipping in quietly, I tucked myself into the last pew, half hidden behind a stone pillar. The chapel was overflowing. Half the town had shown up to watch Rebecca Ward's wedding. Up front I spotted my parents, stiff as ever. My father's hair had gone entirely gray, my mother's frame had withered under the years. They sat at attention like they were on parade review. And then came Rebecca. My kid sister floated down the aisle in a gown with lace sleeves, her hair swept into a tight bun woven with tiny blossoms. In her hands a bouquet of roses and baby's breath, the same flowers she adored when we were little. She glowed, but even from the shadows in the back I caught the flicker of sorrow in her eyes. Smiling, radiant, but hollowed by grief for the sister she thought she'd buried. Mark, her groom, stood tall at the altar in his black tuxedo, beaming at her with a devotion that made my chest ache. That kind of love was what I'd fought for with Adrian, the kind my parents had tried to stomp out. The vows came next, exchanged under Father O'Connor's voice, the same chaplain who'd christened both Rebecca and me. When Rebecca spoke, her words cut me open. Mark, you've healed wounds I thought would never close. You've shown me that love doesn't die when someone leaves. It reshapes into strength. I promise to love you fully, and to hold space in my heart for the sister I know is watching from above. My throat burned. She was pledging her marriage while mourning me. The injustice roared in my chest. When the ceremony ended, I ducked my head and stayed hidden as the bridal procession marched past. She walked within feet of me, utterly unaware her dead sister sat in the shadows. I should have left then, slipped back to my car, satisfied she was safe, married, radiant. But I couldn't. I trailed the convoy of guests to the officers' club, careful to keep distance. From the terrace outside the ballroom, I watched through the windows as the reception kicked off. Rebecca and Mark swayed to it last, her smile wide though the sadness still clung to her eyes. When the father-daughter dance began, I watched my dad waltz her across the floor to Butterfly Kisses, the same tune he'd once danced me to after my high school commissioning ceremony. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she rested her head on his shoulder. Dinner ended and the speeches rolled on. Mark's best man cracked jokes about their academy days. Mom dabbed tears as she spoke of her little girl becoming a woman. Then Rebecca stood, her voice clear as a bugle. This day has been everything I dreamed. But it isn't complete. There's someone missing. Someone who should have stood by my side as maid of honor. My pulse stopped. My sister Elena was the bravest person I've ever known. She taught me to fight for what I believe in, to never settle. She'd have loved Mark, probably threatened him if he hurt me, and cried through the ceremony. Silence swept the room. She lifted her bouquet high. Before I toss this, I dedicate it to my sister Elena, wherever she is. That was it. I couldn't stay hidden another second. I stepped through the French doors just as her arm cocked back to throw. Her eyes locked on mine, bouquet slipping from her grip to the floor. The hall fell silent. 200 heads turned toward me, standing framed in the doorway like a ghost from a war long past. Rebecca's hands flew to her mouth. Elena, she whispered, the name echoing across the room. Then my father saw me. His face drained white, then flushed red. He lurched up, chair clattering to the floor, finger jabbing the air. Why are you still alive? His voice cracked with rage and disbelief. You're supposed to be dead. The ballroom detonated into chaos. Mom shrieked and collapsed back into her seat, gasping for air. Rebecca shoved through the crowd, wedding gown swishing, Mark at her side, protective but confused. Guests whispered in a storm of shock. You're alive, Rebecca sobbed as she crashed into me, clutching me tight. Her scent, flowers and perfume, dragged me back to childhood nights of whispered secrets. I thought you were gone forever. I squeezed her, voice breaking. I'm sorry. I should have been here. Over her shoulder, I caught sight of my father's face, purple with fury, veins bulging. My mother wailed, fanned by Aunt Margaret, whose eyes were wide like she truly was staring at a spirit. My father charged, roaring, "Get out of here. Now. Get out now," my father roared, shoving through the crowd like a man unhinged. Robert, enough. Aunt Margaret barked, planting herself between him and me. Open your eyes and see what you've done. Rebecca pulled away from me, mascara streaking down her cheeks, and spun to face them. What did he mean? She demanded, her voice trembling but strong. Why would Dad say she was supposed to be dead? The ballroom fell silent, save for my mother's ragged sobs. All eyes locked on us, every guest watching our family implode. My father's jaw worked soundlessly, for once in his life stripped of words. I stepped forward, steadying my shaking hands behind my back like I was at attention. Because 3 years ago, while I was clinging to life in a hospital bed, they told the world I was gone. They staged a funeral for me while I was still breathing. Gasps rippled across the room. Rebecca's expression shifted, confusion, then horror, then burning fury. What? She whispered. I looked only at her. It wasn't combat that killed me. A transport truck slammed into my vehicle at an intersection stateside. I was in rehab for months. Adrian called them, begged them to come. Your father told him I was dead to the family. So they made it official. Dad sputtered, "That's not true." But the conviction wasn't there. I snapped back. Then why was your first question, why are you still alive? Why did you tell Adrian you had no daughter named Elena? Rebecca turned to them, her wedding dress stark against the flush in her face. Is it true, Mom? Dad. Mom wept harder, unable to speak. Aunt Margaret's voice cut like a blade. Diane, tell her. Finally, my mother whispered, she chose him over us. She was already dead to this family. The words poisoned the air. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some rising and leaving in disgust, others frozen in disbelief. Rebecca's face was stone, betrayal carving itself deep. You let me mourn her. You let me cry at an empty grave year after year. You let me believe my sister was gone while she was alive the whole time. Dad tried to move toward her. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, she snapped, her voice sharpened with the authority of a teacher addressing a rowdy class. Your pride mattered more than your daughter's life. You'd rather have a dead soldier for a child than admit you were wrong. She faced the crowd, eyes blazing. How many of you knew? How many of you knew my sister was alive? The silence was suffocating. Mark touched her shoulder gently. Maybe we should. No, Rebecca cut him off. They made this public when they staged a funeral. They made it public when they lied to everyone here. He turned back to me, tears streaming. Where have you been? What happened to you? My voice broke but stayed strong. I live in Seattle now. I'm married to Adrian. I built a life. Every day I wanted to call you, but how do you tell someone their parents buried you alive? She whispered, you should have found a way. You're right, I admitted. Fear got the best of me. But I'm here now. Dad finally roared, you're destroying this day. I faced him squarely, finally seeing not the commanding officer of my childhood, but a smaller, weaker man diminished by his own choices. I didn't ruin anything. You did 3 years ago when you decided pride meant more than your daughter. He tried again. We did what was best for the family. No, I countered, voice steady. You did what was easiest for your reputation in this town. You couldn't stomach a daughter who didn't fit your perfect picture, so you erased me. Rebecca's chest heaved as she took it all in. Mark whispered in her ear, trying to ground her. I turned to her. I know this timing is unforgivable. But I couldn't let you start your marriage believing I was gone. You deserve truth, not lies. She wiped her cheeks with her palms, makeup smearing. I need to sit. Mark guided her to a chair as whispers buzzed through the ballroom. Phones were raised. This would be all over social media before dawn. Aunt Margaret crossed to me, tears brimming. Elena. Is it truly you? Hi, Aunt Margaret. She wrapped me in a fierce embrace. I never believed you were gone. Their story never fit. I prayed every day you'd come home. She pulled back, turning a glare on my parents. Robert. Diane. Shame on you. More relatives surged forward. Some hugging me, others whispering apologies, others glaring daggers at my parents. Uncle Daniel looked ready to deck his brother. Cousin Leah sobbed about missing me at her own wedding last year. But my eyes never left Rebecca. She rose at last, walking toward me with all eyes fixed on us. The room held its breath. I'm glad you're alive, she said simply. And I'm glad you're here. But I need time to process this. I understand. She pivoted toward our parents, her voice turning to steel. I want you gone. Both of you. Leave my wedding. Rebecca, you can't mean that, Mom pleaded. I mean it. You lied for 3 years. You let me mourn a sister who was alive. You don't get to stay. Dad's face burned red. She abandoned us. No, Rebecca shot back. She chose love. You chose pride. Those are not the same. She looked at the stunned guests. I'm sorry you had to see this. Please stay. Enjoy the night. Mark and I need air. As she and her husband moved toward the terrace, she paused beside me. You staying in town? Yes. At the Hampton. I'll call you tomorrow. We've got a lot to talk about. My throat tightened. I'm sorry for today. She managed a trembling smile. At least now I know why I always felt something missing. It wasn't grief I carried, it was hope. By dawn, news of my return had spread through the town like a wildfire. Social feeds were already plastered with photos of the chaos. And at 0800 the next morning, Rebecca's number lit up my phone. Her voice was raw but resolute. Coffee? Just the two of us. We met at the same diner where we used to split stacks of pancakes after Sunday drills, back when Dad still dragged us to chapel in pressed uniforms. Rebecca looked drained, her hair still pinned in the remnants of yesterday's wedding style but dressed down in a sweater and jeans. Her eyes were raw from crying. I didn't sleep, she muttered as we slid into a corner booth. Neither did I. She stirred her coffee, voice unsteady. Mark was incredible. He let me fall apart, didn't push for answers, just held me. When I finally told him everything, he listened and said he understood why I had to see you today. I nodded. He seems solid. He is, she whispered, hands trembling. Then she looked up, eyes fierce. Tell me everything. Where were you? Did you really get married? Are you happy? So I told her. I told her about Adrian, about the wreck, about how our parents erased me. I told her about building a new life in Seattle, about my design firm, about the quiet joy I found even while mourning the family I'd lost. She didn't interrupt, just wiped tears every few minutes. When I finished, silence hung heavy. Finally she whispered, I can't believe they let me suffer like that. I used to bring flowers to your grave every month. I talked to you, about Mark, about my job, about planning the wedding. I felt guilty celebrating without you. My throat ached. I'm sorry, Rebecca. I should have found a way to reach you. She shook her head. No. If someone told me my sister was gone and then she wasn't, I wouldn't know how to handle it either. She reached across the table, gripping my hands. Tell me about Adrian. I want to know the man who married my sister. I pulled out my phone, showing her pictures. Adrian at our wedding, cooking in the kitchen, hiking trails with me. She smiled through tears. He looks at you the way Mark looks at me, like nothing else matters. Because he's the most important thing in my world. I want to meet him, she said. He wanted to come yesterday, but I thought it was best to face this alone. She nodded. You were right. Yesterday was already chaos. Then her face grew serious. What happens with Mom and Dad now? I exhaled slowly. I don't know. They've had 3 years to make different choices. When Dad saw me, his first reaction wasn't relief. It was rage that I was still alive. That says everything. If they try to fix things now, it'll be for reputation, not love. Rebecca stared at her cup. You're right. He cared more about the scene at my wedding than about seeing you alive. We stayed there for hours, filling in the blanks of lost years. She told me about finishing her degree, about meeting Mark at a conference, about the small apartment they'd rented and the house they hoped to buy. She showed me her students' drawings, her classroom, the life she'd built while mourning a ghost. When we finally left, she hugged me fiercely. I'm taking a few days for the honeymoon. But when I'm back, bring Adrian. I want to meet my brother-in-law. Are you sure? This is a lot. I've missed my sister for 3 years. I'm not wasting another day. Driving back to Seattle, I felt lighter than I had in years. Rebecca and I would be okay. Healing would take time, but the bond was still there. The love survived even our parents' betrayal. 2 weeks later, Adrian and I drove down for dinner. The first minutes were stiff, but then Adrian and Mark connected immediately, bonding over baseball and the way they loved us. By the end of the night, we were planning visits. Family reached out one by one. Aunt Margaret apologized for not questioning sooner. Uncle Daniel admitted he'd suspected but felt powerless. Cousins, neighbors, even old friends called to say they'd missed me. My parents stayed silent. 3 months after the wedding, Rebecca called. They want to see you, she said flatly. What did you tell them? That's between you and them. But you should know, they've been shunned since the truth came out. People don't look at them the same. That's their problem, I said. Not mine. A week later, a letter arrived at my office. Handwritten. Elena, we know mistakes were made. We were angry and we reacted poorly. We'd like to talk about making things right. No apology. No mention of the fake funeral. No recognition of the harm. Just damage control. Adrian read it and shook his head. Not an apology. Just survival. I agreed. I wrote back. When you're ready to take responsibility for the choices you made and the pain you caused, we can talk. Until then, I wish you well. I never heard from them again. 6 months later, Rebecca called again. She and Mark had bought a house closer to Seattle. I've cut them off, she told me simply. Rebecca, you don't have to do that for me. I'm not. I'm doing it for me. I can't trust people who would lie about something so fundamental. I can't respect people who'd value pride over their children. Now we talk weekly, sometimes more. She and Mark came for Christmas and we cooked dinner while Adrian and Mark argued over football stats. It felt like the family dinners I'd dreamed of, the kind built on love, not appearances. I started therapy, unpacking the grief of losing my parents, the anger at the stolen years with my sister, and the relief of no longer chasing their approval. My firm thrives. Adrian was promoted to Chief of Emergency Medicine. We're even talking about children, about raising them in a home where love isn't conditional. Sometimes I wonder, if I hadn't walked into that church, would Rebecca and I still be strangers? Would my parents have taken their lie to the grave? I'll never know. But I do know this. That day when Dad demanded to know why I was alive, was the first moment I truly felt alive. Because I stopped letting them define me. I learned blood isn't what makes family. Family is who stands beside you, who celebrates your victories, who loves you for who you are. Scars don't vanish, but they harden into lessons. The one on my face reminds me I survived an impact meant to kill me. The one on my heart reminds me love doesn't come with conditions. My parents chose pride. I chose love. And in the end, love won. Would you have stayed hidden to avoid the fallout? Or walked into the fire for the truth? Tell me in the comments. And if this story struck you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about resilience. Share this with someone who needs reminding that their worth isn't dictated by anyone else's blindness. Thanks for being here. And remember, choose love over fear and truth over comfort.